The birthday gift my sister slid across the table looked harmless at first, just a small white box wrapped in silver paper. Everyone was halfway through dinner when she pushed it toward me and said loudly, "Maybe this will finally explain why you never really belonged in this family." A few relatives laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. I opened the box and found a DNA test kit inside. My sister leaned back in her chair, watching me like she had already seen the ending of a movie I hadn't started yet. I mailed the test the next morning, just to prove her wrong. 5 weeks later, the results arrived while I was sitting at work. I stared at the screen for a long time before realizing something was very wrong. So I did the only thing I could think of. I sent the results to our family group chat. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my sister. It was my father's estate lawyer asking me to come to his office immediately. When I walked in 2 days later, my mother couldn't look at me. My sister wouldn't stop smiling. And that's when I realized something terrifying. They hadn't been waiting for the DNA results. They had been waiting for me to see them. I grew up in a house where attention worked like sunlight through a window. It always fell in the same direction. My older sister, Claire, stood naturally in the brightest part of it, while I learned early how to stay out of the way. Our home in Charlotte was large, polished, and quiet in the way expensive houses often are, but the atmosphere inside always carried a strange imbalance. Claire filled every room with opinions and laughter, while my mother encouraged it, praising her confidence, her ambition, her ability to command attention. When Claire caused trouble, my mother called it passion. When I succeeded, she called it expected. My father, Robert Morgan, was different. He wasn't a loud man, but he noticed things. I remember him lingering near the doorway when I studied at night, asking small questions about my work or bringing tea without saying much else. Those small gestures felt like proof that someone in the house saw me clearly. By the time I was 34, I had built a life far away from Charlotte. Chicago suited me. It was big enough that no one cared about family hierarchies or childhood dynamics. I worked as a financial analyst, lived in a quiet apartment overlooking the river, and rarely came home except for holidays. But everything changed when my father died suddenly from a heart condition. The funeral brought relatives and business partners I barely knew. Claire stood beside my mother, accepting condolences like she had inherited not only his assets, but also his authority. I stayed mostly at the edges of conversations, answering politely and watching the strange tension that seemed to pass silently between them whenever my name came up. 3 months after the funeral, my mother called, insisting we have dinner together for my birthday. Her voice sounded overly cheerful, the way people sound when they are carefully avoiding something uncomfortable. When I arrived that evening, the house smelled strongly of lemon cleaner, like someone had tried too hard to make everything feel normal. Claire was already at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, while my mother poured wine she barely touched afterward. Conversation moved stiffly from topic to topic, until I casually asked when my father's will might be discussed. My mother's hand froze around the bottle. Claire looked up slowly and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind someone gives when they've been waiting for a moment to arrive. "Relax," she said lightly. "The legal stuff will sort itself out." Then she reached beside her chair and lifted a small silver-wrapped box onto the table. She slid it toward me with 2 fingers like she was moving a chess piece. "But first," she said sweetly, "I thought you deserved a little clarity." When I opened the box and saw the DNA test kit inside, Claire leaned back in her chair and laughed softly. And suddenly, the entire dinner felt less like a birthday celebration and more like a trap that had been carefully prepared long before I arrived. If you want to see what happened next, stay with me. And if you like stories that reveal what people try to hide, don't forget to like and subscribe. At first, I thought Claire was just trying to humiliate me the way she had done 100 times growing up. But the way my mother reacted told a different story. Her face drained of color so quickly, it looked like someone had turned off the lights behind her eyes. "Claire," she whispered sharply, but the warning came too late. My sister was already enjoying herself. "Come on," she said, tapping the box with one fingernail. "Don't you ever wonder why you never really looked like the rest of us?" The comment drew a few uncomfortable laughs from relatives at the table, but Claire didn't seem interested in whether anyone else found it funny. She was watching me carefully, like she expected a certain reaction. Later that night, I sat alone in my old bedroom holding the DNA kit while the house settled into silence around me. The more I thought about Claire's confidence, the stranger the whole situation felt. Claire wasn't impulsive. She didn't gamble on things she wasn't sure about. If she had gone this far publicly, she believed something would come out of it. That thought stayed with me long enough that curiosity eventually replaced humiliation. The instructions were simple. Register the kit online, swab the inside of your cheek, seal the sample, and mail it back. I followed the steps the next morning before leaving Charlotte. For the next 5 weeks, I barely thought about it. Work kept me busy, and the entire situation felt too ridiculous to take seriously. Then the results arrived while I was sitting at my desk finishing a quarterly report. I opened the notification, expecting confirmation that Claire had simply embarrassed herself. Instead, the summary report showed something I couldn't immediately process. According to the analysis, there was no genetic match between my DNA and the reference sample submitted under my father's name years earlier for medical genealogy records. I read the sentence 3 times before realizing what it implied. Either the test was wrong, or the man who raised me was not my biological father. My hands felt strangely cold as I stared at the screen. The only person who might explain it was my mother, but something about the silence in that Charlotte house weeks earlier told me she already knew the answer. So instead of calling privately, I took a screenshot of the results and sent them directly to our family group chat with a single message. "Does anyone want to explain this?" My phone rang almost immediately, but the name on the screen wasn't my mother or Claire. It was Thomas Keller, the attorney handling my father's estate. His voice sounded calm but unusually direct. "Emily," he said, "I think it would be best if you came to my office in Charlotte as soon as possible. There are some things in your father's will that need to be addressed now. If you want to see what happened next, stay with me. And if you like stories that reveal what people try to hide, don't forget to like and subscribe." 2 days later, I walked into Thomas Keller's office with a lawyer of my own sitting beside me. My mother arrived shortly afterward, looking exhausted, while Claire entered last with the confident posture of someone expecting victory. Keller waited until everyone was seated before opening the thick folder in front of him. "Your father anticipated that certain questions might arise after his death," he said calmly. Claire didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. "Then we can save everyone time," she interrupted, pointing toward me. "She's not actually his daughter. The DNA test proves it." Keller nodded once, but didn't react the way she expected. Instead, he turned a page and continued reading. In a written statement attached to his will, Robert Morgan explains that he became aware when Emily was 2 years old that she was not his biological child. The room went completely silent. My mother closed her eyes while Claire stared at Keller like she had misheard him. Keller continued, "Mr. Morgan writes that biology did not change his decision to raise Emily as his daughter, nor does it change the decisions outlined in this document." Claire's lawyer leaned forward immediately, clearly realizing something she hadn't. Keller finished reading the next line slowly. 70% of Robert Morgan's estate, including the family home and investment holdings, is left to Emily Morgan in recognition of her integrity and loyalty. The remainder will be distributed according to additional instructions. Claire stood up so quickly her chair nearly tipped over. Her lawyer grabbed her arm and whispered urgently about the no contest clause written into the will, explaining that challenging the document would result in her losing everything. I barely heard the rest of the meeting. All I could think about was the quiet man who used to stand in my doorway while I studied, the one who must have carried that secret for decades without ever letting it change the way he treated me. Weeks later, the legal battle Claire had hoped for collapsed under the terms of the will. She left Charlotte furious and nearly broke. My mother calls occasionally now, her voice softer than it used to be, but our conversations never last long. Some families are built on blood, others are built on choices. My father made his choice when I was 2 years old, and in the end, that decision mattered far more than any DNA test ever could. If you enjoyed this story and want more like it, stay with me and don't forget to like and subscribe.